All right, welcome back. Want to highlight the KWEB. It's the China ETF. It's up 10% over the past month and 14% this quarter. So it was your contrarian play to start the year when we asked all of our contributors to the committee to give us one. You said at the time you don't own it. Let me just put it out there. You don't own this.
No, of course not.
But you liked it. Why did you like it? Why did you like it? Why didn't you buy it? And is there enough momentum, do you think, to get you into it now?
So something I actually learned from Jim Grant like 10 years ago. Good things happen to cheap assets. So why was it a contrarian play? I mean, it was down like it was at an 80% drawdown or something, and nobody could come up with a reason for why these stocks should go up. And not all the time. It doesn't always work this way, but it oftentimes does work this way, where when nobody could even fabricate in their wildest imagination why you would buy an entire asset class, those are the types of situations where you don't even really need much to turn in the way of news to get a huge turn in the prices of the stocks. So that's exactly what happened with Chinese equities overall. And of course, these are the best of the Chinese equities. These are the technology and internet companies, many of which also trade here in the United States. Stocks are on fire. Everyone hated them in November, December. Maybe a few people like them now, but I still think it's a contrarian play. And what China has figured out is that they actually need their stock market to work. So it's not fundamentally important to their economy, but spiritually and emotionally it is. And so that's happening around the world as countries say, what do the United States do differently from the rest of us? Well, for starters, they didn't lock up the CEOs of their tech companies. So I think you're seeing a softening in regulation and rhetoric toward the companies that make up the KWEB, and that's why this thing is on fire. And again, that's not a big fundamental change, but it was good enough.
So Jeff DeGraff, who's a technician, talked to him a bunch on the closing bell. He's on China and the technicals.
Yeah.
Quote, we're convinced that the bullish contrarian tactical call that we made in early February on China is turning into a strategic bullish call on the index. It's not a lock, but risk-reward is favorable.
Yeah, so I think Jeff has been right. I called it. I didn't invest in it. I just kind of like talked. So it's not so great for me.
Oh, you do that well.
But I do that well. Anyway, I think that this has room to agree with Jeff.
One of the things that I thought about a month ago, I was thinking maybe China's a good contrarian spot to be. The argument was that it had already bottomed, right? It's going through a bottoming phase, so it was ready to jump. The concern that I have is not that it'll go lower, but that it just goes nowhere. And that we've got this sort of currency crisis continuing to heat up in Asia, Japan not out of the woods at all, intervening over and over and over again. Big trading partner with China, that's why I stopped and decided not to do it. So how do you square the exogenous stuff that might happen to them and pressure it?
Well, so one of the things with China is that everyone has an opinion on it, myself included, but a lot of times that economy or that market zigs when most people expect it to zag. I think there are some really good reasons for that, but most of what we hear here in the West doesn't necessarily square with the reality on the ground. So I actually want to give a shout out to Crane Shares and Brendan Hearn. And of course he's biased, he's bullish on China, but he writes China Last Night. It's ChinaLastNight.com, and basically it's Western news, but from the perspective of being a bull on China. So a lot of times we'll hear this horrible thing happened, but in reality, when you think about it from the viewpoint of an investor, it's the opposite of that. And so if people really want to get educated, Crane Shares puts out a lot of great information, and that is the sponsor of the Crane Shares KWEB ETF.
All right.